The first question here requires us to create a program that reads a text file containing the number of words or containing a number of words. Maybe that sounds better, and print the results. Okay, so let's see we are going to talk about requirement.txt file. Let's have the legit content in there. Okay, then let's attend to this question. So we said that to read through the content of a file, we have with open. Okay, then mention the file. Okay, that is the file name or the path to the file that you want to read through. Okay, the file in question is the requirements.txt. Then the mode in question, we want to make use of the R mode. That is, we want to read through the content of that file. Again, in here we need to mention as file so that we can make use of whatever we mention here. Okay, so down here we want to read through the text of this file, so we can simply talk about text is equals to, we have the file dot, we want to read through the content of that file. Of course, up there we have seen the various methods that we can use with file: read, write, and all that. Okay, then once we read through the file, we can proceed and create a new variable. Okay, in case we wanted to see the content of that file, we would simply have talked about text. All right, then to execute that, we see we are able to get the output of the content of that file. All right, we can have a new variable here being defined as word or words. Let me use words is equals to out of that text and make use of a method called split. Okay, so let's print and see what happens to our words here. Okay, so look, when we make use of the split method, it creates a list. All right, so again, if it creates a list, then we are able to count the number of words within this list. Okay, so remember how we used to get the number of words in a list? I'm sure we remember that. So remember how we used to do it? So we just have the length, that is len, then pass in the name of our list, because once we split, we have assigned that to a new variable. Again, we just need to print what we have here. All right, so execute that and we see that we have 3 words. So that's simply what was expected of us in that question. So let's move on to question number 2. So write a script that copies the content of one text file into another, ensuring that the original file remains unchanged. All right, so the same syntax remains. We are going to talk about with open. Okay, and we are opening, let's create a copy of requirement.txt file. Requirements.txt file. Okay, then we want to read through the content of this file, so let's just have r, okay, as file. All right, then we can assign the content of this file to the variable named content. So we have file dot read through the content. Okay, so we have the content of that of this file being held in a variable called content. All right, okay, so again, let's define a new block. So we have been able to read through the content of the requirement.txt file. Okay, so we want to create another file and copy the content of this file to the new file. Okay, so again, let's do a new block here. So we are going to talk about with open, then let's call it new So this is the new file name. So new requirements.txt. Okay, then we are going to use the write mode. Okay, we want to write into that file as file, but to avoid possible conflict with what we used here, maybe we can slightly change and use something different. Let me talk about as copy, or we said that this is a variable name, so you can't give it any name. Okay, then in here we can make use of copy dot. We have copy dot, we want to write into this file, so we have copy dot write. Then what do we want to write into that file? So it is the content that we have here. Okay, so just pass in the content of the requirements.txt file. Okay, so something that we said is that what this block will do is that in case this file does not exist, it will create one, okay, and add the content that we read from the requirement.txt. Okay, again, if the file exists, it will override the content with the new content here. Okay, so let's execute our program and see how it behaves. So we don't get any output, but look at what we have here. We have created a new file, new requirements.txt. Well, I made a typo, but then a new file has been created with the same content as the requirements.txt here. All right. So again, that is what was required of us in that question. Creating a new file and copying some content from an existing file. All right. Question number 3. Question number 3 here requires us to come up with a simple file renamer, and we are supposed to develop a program that renames a file based on the user input. So allow the user to specify the old and new file. Interesting. Okay, let's import OS. Okay, then we talk about old. I can talk about old file. I think that's a better name. That's a good name, whereby we ask the user to input. So new, I can talk about new name because we actually want to rename. So new name, so input. Okay, then we just have a single command to rename, that is os.rename, and in here we are talking about the old file and the new name. Okay, so again, this simple program is supposed to do exactly what the question requires us to do, but it's a good thing to test our program. Okay, so enter the file to rename. So let me enter a file that does not exist. Let's see the behavior, password.py. Okay, enter the new file name, new pass.py. Okay, file not found error. So I believe when creating such scripts, we should also be aware of possible errors so that we can be able to do the exception handling as needed. Okay, so for now, we do not expect such errors to happen. So for now, let's focus on what we have. But again, it's a good idea to be able to handle those errors as needed. Okay, so again, let me execute my program here. So I'll be renaming requirement.txt. Okay, so I'll have new rec.txt. Press enter. Something happens. We no longer have requirement.txt, but we have new rec. All right. So again, that's the program that we were required to create. So question number 4. So question number 4 requires us to create a simple file management system that allows users to add, delete, and list files in a specific directory. Okay, so again, that's the OS OS library in use. So we are going to still make use of the OS, import OS. Okay. Then we want to, let me start with the first one to add. So that allows users to add, delete list files. Okay. So to add a new file, add a new file. Okay, so in this one we might not necessarily make use of the OS library. So let's see. So we can have with open, and we are going to talk about, say, the file name here that we want to add. So let me talk about new.txt, and in here I want to write into that file. I'll talk about as file. Okay, then I proceed to talk about file dot write. Then we don't want to write anything, so we just want to create a new file with this. So if I execute this program here, what happens? So I'm sure you noted that a new txt file popped up here. Okay, doesn't have any content. So we can use that to add a new file. Okay, but then we can extend this functionality to creating a function so that we do not always edit this block of code with the new file name. Okay, we just need to pass in the file name to our function, and it will do the rest of the process. All right, so I'll do this. I'll define a function. So let me talk about add file. Okay, then in here I can pass in the file name. All right, so remember the indentation, you need to be sure to do that. And basically that's it. So okay, we are not yet done. So in here, instead of hard coding the file name, we just need to pass in the file name there. Okay, so once we do that, remember, after creating a function, that's not enough. You need to call the function. So the way to call the function, you can talk about add file, then enter the name of the file. So let me call it function file.txt. All right, so we don't expect any output here, but let's execute this and see the behavior. Okay, so no output, no errors, but we have gotten a new file here. So again, in case you wanted to create multiple files, you can simply duplicate what we have here. Say file 2, and this file 3, and this file 1. So if we do that, okay, say what we get: file 1, file 2, file 3. Okay, so that's how to go about creating the function that adds a new file or allows the users to add a new file. So in case you are probably creating a desktop application, this will remain, but then you might need to attach this function to some button. Okay, and this button should pick up the input from the user and proceed to create the file. All right. Okay, so the next one is the ability to delete a file that has been created. So let's define a function. Sorry. So let's define a function. So we are going to talk about define delete file. So in here, pass in the file name. All right. I hope we remember how the OS can be used to remove a file. So now that we have used a function, just pass in the file name here. All right, so once you do that, remember, after defining a function, we can call the function delete file, then in here pass in the name of the file. Okay, so I want to delete this file. So look, in here the file will be created by this command, but then this one will delete the file. So let's watch file 1 here. Let's execute our program here and see how it behaves. All right, no such file. Okay, so I need to have .txt. So we cannot delete a file that does not exist. All right, so see what has happened to our function file1.txt. It has been deleted. So again, we have given the users the ability to do that. Finally, we need to give them the ability uh, to list files in a specific directory. All right, so let's see. So for now, let me comment this one out so that we don't keep on creating and deleting files. We want to see how the users can be able to list the content of a given directory. So the way to do that, we can have define. Okay, we can talk about list content, or so this will probably, okay, let's have list content. Okay, then our function doesn't take up anything for now. Then we can talk about print. And what are we printing? So the OS module has a way of getting the content of the current directory. Okay, so if we, for instance, execute this, or rather if we call this function, let's see how it behaves. Okay, so we see all the files and directories within this path here. Okay, so we may want to, okay, let me show you something. I would rather use this console, import OS. Okay, then if I talk about os dot list dir, that, so I get the content of the current directory here. All right, so what about if I want to get the content of a different path, a different directory? So I can simply have, say I have home. All right, so I have home. Let's see. Okay, I needed to have that as well. Okay, so see, I am able to get the content of home. If I go further and get the content of that username, all right, we see we again have so many content. And mind you, the OS module is able to display the hidden files as well. Okay, so usually hidden file starts with dot. Okay, so these files that you are seeing starting with a dot, you might not just see them by navigating to the file manager and viewing the content of these paths. Okay, so again, this is what is required of us here, but we might want probably to pass in the path here. Let's see if this works. Let us see if this works in our favor. The path there, we want to provide the path. Okay, so in case we want to talk about, say, home, all right, let's see if that works. Okay, sorry, never meant to do that, meant to do that. All right, so see, in case you provide the path, the right path, of course, then you will be able to get the content. So we don't necessarily do this to get the content of the current directory. Okay, let me make use of a path that does not exist. Of course, we get an error, a file not found error. So that's where the try and except box comes into picture. Okay, so again, the current directory, let me make use of the dot. Let's see if the dot will work or otherwise. Right, so basically the dot refers to the current directory, so that's why we get the content of the current directory. All right, again, that is what was required of us in that question. All right, so I hope it's some interesting stuff to see what you could probably do by point and click. We have seen Python is able to do that with a few lines of code. Okay.